We're live from Washington, D.C. And today on First Post America, the courts hit back at Donald Trump, a triumphant homecoming, and a setback in Ukraine. All this and more, but first, a look at the latest headlines. The Trump administration releases more than 2,000 classified documents related to the assassination of former President John F. Kennedy in 1963. Lawmakers in Mexico City vote to ban violent bullfights and replace them with a new form of bloodless spectacle, triggering outrage as well as celebrations. Canada and Australia to jointly develop a new military radar system in the Arctic worth over $4 billion amid a surge in global interest in the region. The presidents of Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo hold surprise ceasefire talks in Qatar hours after peace negotiations in Angola failed. And Google agrees to pay $28 million to settle a lawsuit claiming it gives better pay and career opportunities to white and Asian employees over workers from other ethnic backgrounds. We begin at the White House today, where President Donald Trump held a 90-minute phone call with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin on Tuesday. The two leaders discussed a 30-day ceasefire proposal, which President Trump's team worked out with the Ukrainians in Saudi Arabia last week. While Putin agreed to stop attacking Ukraine's energy infrastructure temporarily, he did decline to endorse a full month-long truce. Now, soon after the phone call, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he is ready to support the scaled-back agreement.
We support all steps aimed at the end of the war. We will support them. But in order to support them, we need to understand what exactly we support. When President Trump has time, he is a busy man. When he has time, he can call me anytime. He has my phone number. We are ready to talk through further steps with pleasure.
President Zelensky also hoped that President Trump would put more pressure on Putin to achieve a lasting peace.
If President Trump can put more pressure in terms of details and force him to stop striking the infrastructure and the sea, if this is the first step and there are no other steps, then he should share the details on how we are going to do it. I am sure that Ukrainian and American sides will support any step that will lead to decreasing the number of strikes on both military and civilian infrastructure.
However, the Ukrainian leaders' hopes and dreams were in fact short-lived as Russian drones immediately struck a hospital and power facilities in Ukraine. President Zelensky said Putin effectively rejected the ceasefire by launching attacks shortly after his call with President Donald Trump. Meanwhile, speaking to Fox News, Donald Trump said he discussed all things related to a ceasefire with Putin. However, American aid to Ukraine was never mentioned.
Well, you have a situation where you have a lot of guns pointing at each other foolishly, because it would have never happened if I were president. That was not a war that was supposed to happen, and it did happen. So that's where we are. And right now, you have a lot of guns pointing at each other, and a ceasefire without going a little bit further would have been tough. Russia has the advantage, as you know. They have encircled about 2,500 soldiers. They're nicely encircled, and that's not good. We didn't talk about aid, actually. We didn't talk about aid at all. We talked about a lot of things, but aid was never discussed.
The United States is the single largest military donor for Ukraine, providing a whole host of offensive and defensive capabilities against Russia. And ending aid to Kyiv is a key condition for Russia to enforce any ceasefire agreement with Ukraine. Putin also insists that Russia should keep control of the seized Ukrainian territory for an eventual settlement. Now, earlier in the month, Putin experienced Washington's readiness to cut off support for Ukraine after President Trump had a public altercation with President Zelensky. Meanwhile, Ukraine already seems to have been making concessions as it pulled out of most of Russia's Kursk region over the weekend. And now, as talks for the much-anticipated ceasefire are set to continue in Saudi Arabia this Sunday, it's unclear if President Trump, who proclaims himself a master deal maker, can move Putin to a place where both sides come out ahead. If this limited ceasefire is any indication, however, Donald Trump certainly has his work cut out for him. And staying in Washington, the conflict between the executive and judiciary branches appears to be escalating day by day. In a rare move, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Roberts, issued a statement publicly rebuking President Donald Trump. Roberts' remarks were in response to President Trump's call to impeach a judge who ruled against his deportation plans.
For more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. The normal appellate review process exists for that purpose.
The Chief Justice's statement came hours after a post by Donald Trump on his social media platform, Truth Social. In his post, the Commander-in-Chief ranted against U.S. District Judge James Boasberg, calling him an unelected troublemaker and agitator. This after Boasberg issued an order blocking the deportation of alleged members of a Venezuelan gang to El Salvador.
This radical left lunatic of a judge, a troublemaker and agitator who was sadly appointed by Barack Hussein Obama, was not elected president. He didn't win the popular vote, by a lot. He didn't win all 7 swing states. He didn't win 2,750 to 525 counties. He didn't win anything. I won for many reasons in an overwhelming mandate, but fighting illegal immigration may have been the #1 reason for this historic victory. I'm just doing what the voters wanted me to do. This judge, like many of the crooked judges I am forced to appear before, should be impeached. We don't want vicious, violent, and demented criminals, many of them deranged murderers in our country. Make America great again.
Boasberg's ruling on Monday blocked President Trump's executive order, which invoked the 18th Century Alien Enemies Act. The federal judge also ordered the deportation flights that were already mid-air to turn around and return to the United States. However, despite the court's directive, the Trump administration sent over 250 alleged Venezuelan gang members to a prison in El Salvador. In a later hearing, Judge Boasberg questioned the Trump administration lawyers about why the flights had not returned to the U.S. Justifying its ignorance, the White House said federal courts have no jurisdiction over a president conducting foreign affairs. President Trump's team also filed a motion demanding the removal of Judge Boasberg from the case.
This administration acted within the confines of the law, again, within the president's constitutional authority and under the authority granted to him under the Alien Enemies Act. We are quite confident in that, and we are wholly confident that we are going to win this case in court. All of the planes that were subject to the written order, the judge's written order, took off before the order was entered in the courtroom on Saturday.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump has responded to John Roberts' comments, saying the Chief Justice didn't mention his name and could be referring to other people. President Trump's ongoing fights with the federal courts do not end there, however. On Tuesday, a U.S. district judge blocked President Trump's executive order banning transgender people from serving in the U.S. military. And in another setback, a court ruled that Elon Musk-led Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, can't make future cuts to U.S. aid as it is likely unconstitutional. Moreover, the Trump administration is now set to rehire about 25,000 probationary workers to comply with last week's court orders. And now heading to Europe, a French politician is making waves by suggesting the U.S. should return the Statue of Liberty, claiming America no longer upholds its values. Raphael Glucksmann argues that President Donald Trump's policies undermine the very ideals of freedom and democracy that the statue symbolizes. His remarks have sparked a heated debate on both sides of the Atlantic, drawing a sharp response from the White House. So is this just political posturing, or does Glucksmann's argument hold weight? And could Lady Liberty actually be heading back to France? Here's the story with more.
For nearly 140 years, the Statue of Liberty has stood as a symbol of freedom and democracy in New York Harbor. A gift from France in 1886, it has welcomed generations of immigrants to the United States. But now, one French politician claims America no longer deserves it. Raphael Glucksmann, a member of the European Parliament from France, is making headlines after calling on the US to return Lady Liberty. He argues that recent American policies have betrayed the values the statue represents. You see, the Statue of Liberty was a gift from the French people, marking the 100th anniversary of the American Declaration of Independence. Designed by sculptor Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi, it was intended to symbolize the shared ideals of liberty and democracy between France and the United States. But in a fiery speech this weekend, Francis Glucksmann claimed that some Americans are now quote-unquote choosing to switch to the side of the tyrants. He also accused US President Donald Trump's administration of turning away from democratic principles. Glucksmann's message was clear. If the US won't stand for freedom, then Lady Liberty might be better off back in France.
Et nous allons dire aux Américains.
And we're going to tell the Americans who chose to tip over to the side of the tyrants, the Americans who fire researchers for showing scientific freedom. First, give us back the Statue of Liberty. We gave it to you as a gift, but apparently you despise it, so it will be fine here with us.
On vous en a fait cadeau.
Hello, everybody.
But the White House wasn't having it. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt shot back, making it clear that the US has no plans to return the iconic sculpture. She also reminded France that America helped liberate them in both world wars.
My advice to that unnamed low-level French politician would be to remind them that it's only because of the United States of America that the French are not speaking German right now. So they should be very grateful to our great country.
The latest controversy has ignited one question in everyone's mind. Can France actually claim back the Statue of Liberty? The short answer is no. According to the United Nations Cultural Agency, UNESCO, the World Heritage Treasure is a US government property. So no, France can't just take it back. Meanwhile, Glucksmann has made a U-turn on his bizarre demand, clarifying he wasn't literally calling for the statue's removal. The French politician says his statement was intended as a wake-up call for the United States. The statue is yours, he posted online, but what it embodies belongs to everyone. It's worth noting that France does have a smaller version of Lady Liberty sitting on an island in the Seine River in Paris. And while the statue in America isn't going anywhere, the controversy highlights a bigger question. Could Trump's America live up to the ideals that the Statue of Liberty truly represents?
And shifting our attention to the Middle East, the Yemen-based Houthis have claimed responsibility for a fourth attack in 72 hours on an American fleet in the Red Sea, despite ongoing U.S. strikes against them. The Iran-backed group says it targeted the USS Harry S. Truman aircraft carrier and other warships using cruise missiles and drones. The Houthis have warned they would expand attacks on both the United States and Israel if their aggression against Gaza and Yemen continues.
The Yemeni armed forces detected hostile military movements in the Red Sea, preparing for a large-scale aerial attack on Yemen. In response, we launched a joint operation using cruise missiles and drones, targeting the USS Harry S. Truman and other warships. American aggression will not deter Yemen from supporting the Palestinian people. Unless the brutal assault on Gaza stops, we will escalate our military operations against the Zionist enemy.
In response, the U.S. conducted over 10 airstrikes on multiple targets across Yemen overnight, including the Sada province, a longtime Houthi stronghold, and the Red Sea port city of Hudaydah. The Trump administration has vowed to continue strikes until the Houthis cease attacks on the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, which are major shipping routes for global trade. Meanwhile, in response to Israel's deadly air attack on Gaza that claimed more than 400 lives, the Houthis claim to have fired a ballistic missile at Israel's Nevatim air base.
With reliance on Allah and by His grace, the Yemeni armed forces successfully carried out an operation targeting the Nevatim airbase with a Palestine 2 hypersonic ballistic missile. By the will of Allah, this operation achieved its objective successfully. The Yemeni armed forces will expand the scope of targets in occupied Palestine in the coming hours and days unless the aggression against Gaza comes to an end.
Tuesday's missile attack by the Houthis on Israel marks the first reported attack on Israel from Yemen since the January 19th ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. Israel says it intercepted the missile launched from Yemen after air raid sirens sounded across multiple regions. Meanwhile, in a televised interview, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said increased military pressure on Hamas is crucial to securing the release of hostages. Netanyahu said he has ordered strikes on Gaza because Hamas had rejected proposals to secure a ceasefire extension.
And I have promised you many times, if Hamas persists in its refusal and does not release our hostages, we will return to fighting. And indeed, we have returned to fighting. We have returned to fighting with strength. Together with the Minister of Defense, I accepted the recommendation of the IDF and our security officials to resume intense fighting against Hamas. From now on, Israel will act against Hamas with ever-increasing force. From now on, negotiations will take place only under fire.
With the Houthis vowing more attacks in the U.S. and Israel intensifying their response, the conflict in the Middle East is showing no signs of cooling down, raising fears of a wider regional conflict. And our final story of the day is nothing short of extraordinary. NASA astronauts Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore have finally returned home after an agonizing 9 months in space. What began as an 8-day mission turned into a prolonged ordeal filled with uncertainty, setbacks, and the looming question, will they ever be able to return? Stranded aboard the ISS due to technical failures, their fate hung in the balance for months. But in a moment of triumph and relief, SpaceX successfully brought them back to Earth, ending what felt like an endless wait. As their capsule splashed down, the world breathed a collective sigh of relief. Our final story shares their harrowing journey that ended in triumph.
After being stranded in space for 9 long months, astronauts Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore have finally returned to Earth. Their unexpected journey united people across continents who held their breath, sent prayers, and hoped for their safe return. And as if the universe itself had been watching over them, it wasn't just humans who celebrated their homecoming. As their capsule splashed down into the ocean, a pod of dolphins appeared, circling around as if offering their own cosmic welcome. After a fiery descent through the atmosphere, the duo splashed down off the coast of Florida, smiling and waving as they emerged from the capsule. Not just them, but the entire world breathed a sigh of relief. Officials at NASA said that the crew is doing great. They confirmed that Wilmore and Williams would spend some time on the recovery ship before heading back to Houston. They will then undergo medical evaluations, reunite with their families, and debrief on their time in space before taking some well-deserved time off. Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams had initially embarked on their journey in June 2024 aboard Boeing's Starliner for what was meant to be an 8-day test mission. However, technical failures led to an extended stay in space, hence transforming their brief assignment into a 9-month endurance test aboard the International Space Station. Both Wilmore and Williams, seasoned NASA astronauts and retired U.S. Navy test pilots, had been tasked with evaluating Starliner's capabilities as part of NASA's Commercial Crew Program. But when the astronauts faced technical difficulties, NASA decided to return the Starliner to Earth unmanned, leaving the 2 astronauts on the ISS until a safe alternative was arranged. That alternative came in the form of SpaceX Dragon capsule, which finally brought them back to Earth. While stranded in space, Wilmore and Williams turned their extended stay into a period of productivity. They contributed to over 100 scientific experiments and logged nearly 900 hours of research. Their work spanned critical studies in microgravity, human physiology, and space sustainability. This research could prove instrumental in NASA's long-term vision of landing humans on Mars. However, life aboard the ISS for such an extended period came with its challenges. Prolonged exposure to microgravity impacts the human body in significant ways. For example, muscle and bone loss, fluid shifts that can lead to kidney stones, vision problems, and balance difficulties upon return. If reports are to be believed, then it might take the two astronauts years to recover. However, NASA mitigates these effects through specialized exercise routines. But adjusting back to Earth's gravity remains a difficult process. Despite the unexpected hurdles, Williams and Wilmore have returned not just as astronauts, but as pioneers of endurance in space. Their journey underscores the unpredictability of space travel and the critical importance of human ingenuity in overcoming challenges beyond our planet. And as they take their first steps back on solid ground, one thing is certain: their extraordinary mission will be remembered, not just for the scientific advancements it yielded, but for the perseverance, adaptability, and quiet heroism that defined it.
That's Firstpost America for this Wednesday. I'm Eric Ham signing off from our studios here in Washington, D.C. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in.